This is not financial advice. The Bitcoin Source is an educational platform, not linked to any financial institution. The content of our podcast is solely for information and should not be seen as an offer to buy, sell, or hold Bitcoin or other financial assets. Consult a financial expert before investing. While our guests share their personal views, these may not always align with those of the Bitcoin Source. Opinions expressed in the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation, are the speaker's own and may differ from the Bitcoin Source's views. Investing always carries risks. Please conduct your own research.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Source, your number one podcast for diverse Bitcoin knowledge. I'm Daru, your host for today's thought-provoking session. We're thrilled to have with us Rajat Soni. He has 10 years of experience in the finance industry and is a certified CFA. At the time of this interview, Rajat had over 80,000 followers on Twitter, so he definitely is someone who can engage an audience. I was super happy to talk to this guy because he just gets it. My audience should be in for a real treat with this Bitcoin conversation. Without further ado, welcome, Rajat.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you having me on this call. I'm always looking forward to these conversations.
Rajat, this is your first time here, so I kind of want to start from your earliest inception of finding out about Bitcoin. Could you start by sharing with us what initially drew you to Bitcoin and what was your first encounter with it when you first got started?
I think it was a combination of things. In the beginning, I worked in the finance industry. During the pandemic, we had a little bit more time to do whatever we wanted. Really, we were working from home and all that stuff. I mean, everybody's gone through it. In that time, I started learning. I did the CFA before that, and I had a background. I understood the basics of finance, but I feel like I hadn't really gone deep enough. So I started doing a little bit more digging. I started doing a little bit more work to understand how the market works, how the industry works, how just the financial industry works in general. And I read the book, The Bitcoin Standard. That was the biggest difference maker, I guess, the thing that I learned the most from. It's really funny to say that Peter Schiff had a huge impact on my Bitcoin education, right? He taught me the basics. I learned a lot from his podcast. He knows a lot. He knows what he's talking about, right? He has a history. He has a deep understanding of the history of finance, I guess you can say, or the history of economics kind of thing. So I started learning from him, but I noticed that every single podcast he would say something about Bitcoin. He'd say something negative about it. I feel like him constantly talking about it, constantly saying, "Oh, this is the worst thing ever. This is never going up." And then he would say, "Oh, it went up. Why did it go up? It's going to come back down." Him just like constantly saying that, it helped me understand that he probably doesn't know what he's talking about, and maybe I should look further, right? Maybe he's done the research for everything else. This is technology. Maybe he doesn't understand it. So it made me look further. I read the Bitcoin Standard. Amazing book. It was, I think it really shed light on why gold was valuable and why Peter Schiff really loved gold. And then over time, I just kept listening to more and more podcasts, right? I listened to more podcasts, read more books, had conversations with people. I mean, you kind of start noticing that everybody's conversations are about how life has gotten so expensive, right? Life is constantly getting more expensive, and it will get more expensive forever. There's no way to change that. There's no way to get rid of that. And we need to find a solution, right? We need to find out, before we can find a solution, we need to figure out why it's happening. Then once we figure out why it's happening, we can start looking for a solution, a way to fix our issues. So this led me into Bitcoin. This led me into learning why Bitcoin can and will probably be the world reserve asset, right? And once you see it, I feel like once you get it, you can't unsee it, right? You can't change it's like the Matrix references, right? Once you take the red pill, you can't unsee what you saw. That's where the orange pill is, right? So once you start seeing that there are problems with the current system, it's very easy to see why Bitcoin is the solution, right? And then you keep digging deeper, and you figure out how broken the old system really is. I mean, I did the CFA, right? The CFA is fully it shows you how to make the broken system work for you. Bitcoin is the complete opposite. It gets rid of the cash flow that we're told that we need. It gets rid of having to ask somebody for rent on a property. It gets rid of dividends. It gets rid of financial statements. All this stuff is gone, right? Bitcoin, if you save in Bitcoin, you're good to go. You don't need to be doing a 4-year degree to figure out which companies to invest in, right? I mean, it's a game changer for everybody. As long as you can put in the time to understand it, it's impossible for you not to see it. So that was my journey. I learned a lot from Peter Schiff. Funny enough, then I went into the Bitcoin Standard and I started learning a little bit more and more. I started asking more questions. Once you answer those questions, it's hard to not see where this is going.
I definitely can commend you and relate to you in a sense of when I first got out of university, my major was in business management, but I actually delved into the finance world for a few years, about 7 years or so. I worked at as a hedge fund associate at JP Morgan Chase, and I did at State Street Bank as well. And I found out about Bitcoin while working there from an engineer. And I'm sure, Rajat, you can relate to this where it was just taboo. It was just something that as a banker, as a guy that's in the finance space, like internet magic money is just not something that you talk about around the lunch table. You know what I mean? Like it's like craziness to talk about that stuff. And like I told you off air, listening to your tweets, reading your tweets, and just seeing the passion that you have for Bitcoin and just having the knowledge of being a certified CFA and having a background on first principles of economics, finance, understanding how money works. It's always valuable to have people like you in the space because at the end of the day, like Bitcoin is a financial economic tool. And the best way to look at that is from someone that has experience in that space. So I truly commend you and I'm super happy to have you on this show to talk about Bitcoin because as you know, in the world that we're from, a lot of people are super skeptical. Yes, the ETF is approved, but people are still like, okay, what's the big deal about this Bitcoin thing? And then you have this guy that has a decade of experience in finance talking about Bitcoin, tweeting it every single day. It should be an aha moment for anyone to say, if this guy understands what's going on, all these other bankers and hedge fund managers and financial advisors should really be getting on board with Bitcoin and figuring out why this is the moment that we need to seize right now.
I think the funny thing is that some of the people who don't have a finance background actually got it much before the people, a lot earlier than the people who do have the finance background, right? Much earlier, right? And it was because I think the the finance industry kind of tries to keep you in a bubble, right? It tries to keep you in that.
Which one's the best crypto asset? Well, Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Okay, what's the second best? There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset. There's a crypto asset. It's called Bitcoin, right? Right? There's no second best, okay? But take all your money, buy Bitcoin. Then take all your time, figure out how to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin. Then take all your time and figure out what you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And if you absolutely love the thing that you don't want to sell it, go mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with it. And if you've got a business that you love because your family works for the business that's in your family for 37 years and you can't bear to sell it, mortgage it, finance it, and convert the proceeds into the hardest money on earth, which is Bitcoin.
This channel is for education purposes only and is not affiliated with any financial institution. This is not financial advice. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now back to the episode.
In that mindset where you can't get away without earning cash flow. If an asset doesn't pay you cash flow, it's garbage, right? If an asset can't, the value appreciation of the asset doesn't matter as much as the actual cash. I mean, as much as the cash flows, right? At the end of the day, if you can get 100% returns without cash flow, why would you give that up for like 3, 4, 5% cash flow? It doesn't really make any sense, right? But most people don't think of it that way. Most people are taught to believe that they need to get cash flow. I mean, if you look at all these comments from these so-called finance experts, they're all going to tell you, oh no, it doesn't produce cash flow, it doesn't produce anything, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it has no utility, it has no What else is there? Oh, it's a Ponzi scheme. What other things are they? What other things have you seen?
They're just meme coins. It's
Made
just
out of
like a
thin air,
collectible, things like
backed by
that. Yeah.
nothing. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
It's see the list goes on, right? It can keep going on forever. And every year we're gonna find a new reason not to buy Bitcoin. People are gonna find a new reason for why it died. People are going to find a new reason for why it's going to zero. People are going to find a new reason for why the world should ignore this thing, even though it's the best performing asset in the world, right? It's because people are in denial. They've been taught that cash flow works, but cash flow isn't all that matters, right? Cash flow is when you have a real estate property, for example, your cash flow comes at the expense of somebody else, right? When a lot of people, so I've seen posts about people talking about how real estate is the greatest investment in the world, and everybody should have 10 rental properties, 20 rental properties, 30 rental properties. Okay, so if everybody has 20 rental properties, who's going to rent from you, right? So the system is designed to keep one group poor while the other group eats off their back, right? These groups of people, there's one. I'm not going to mention their name, but there's one couple on Twitter. You probably know who they are. They had a post a couple of days ago where they said how you can lend, if you have $1 million, you can lend that $1 million to some random party and earn 12% interest. How risky is that? If somebody's earning 12%, if somebody's paying you 12%, they need to earn more than 12% to pay you back, right? I mean, it's common sense. What are they doing to earn that 12%? How do you know what they're doing, right? What if they don't pay you back? What if you gave them that $1 million and you never get it back? Why not buy something that you can take full self-custody of, hold it in your own wallet, hold it in your own, I mean, I have a wallet. This is a wallet, right? This is the thing you have to take care of. This is it. That's it. It's not that hard. But people are so tied up on the cash flow. They're so tied up on all these shit coins that are staking. They're giving them staking revenue, but they're not looking at it from first principles. I think that's the problem here. Most people don't see money from first principles. I had an argument. It was so weird. I had an argument with someone who told me that real estate is not used as a store of value, right? It just goes so deep. People really don't understand. They just think that, okay, real estate is there to generate cash flows, and this is my thing. I'm going to keep as many of these as I can, and who cares about the people who are using it? I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's exploitation, right? You're forcing somebody to pay for something they need because you're hoarding it. You're keeping it under custody, right? You're not giving them access to something they need, a basic human need. You're using that system to generate cash flows for yourself so you can be free while everybody else is working forever. It's a broken system. I think Bitcoin is the only way that fixes it, or the only thing that fixes it, and most people really haven't figured it out yet. They're not going to figure it out until Bitcoin's at 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, $1 million.
Yeah, I agree with that so wholeheartedly. And, I won't mention the podcast, but there was a very popular podcast where the host asked the guest, what was your worst investment? And I mean, this guest was multimillionaire, very famous in the entertainment industry. And the first thing he says is, I lost $5 million with FTX because I didn't take my money out in time. And the first thing I thought was like, well, you're not making a baby. So if you didn't pull out in time, that's your fault. And, it's just one of those things where they tie in the cryptocurrency space and the FTX stuff with Bitcoin, which is completely different. And for you to lose $5 million in FTX means that you were probably staking, over leveraging, being greedy, or doing things that were not traditional in the finance space that makes sense, because any certified CFA, CPA would tell you, hey, you're over leveraging, your risk is too high. Why would you do that? But the greed factor comes in so crazy that it goes back to first principles. It comes back to the philosophy of how you think as an investor. And that leads to my second question, Rajat, which is every Bitcoin enthusiast has a personal philosophy or a set of principles they associate with Bitcoin. What is yours and how has it evolved over time?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think over time, I've learned to appreciate the proof of work, right? I used to think, okay, yeah, proof of. I know a lot of people say, oh, Bitcoin uses too much energy. uses too much. It uses too many resources. But when you understand how proof of work is so important to just the economy in general and growth and economic stability, you kind of see why Bitcoin needs proof of work, right? Why it's required. I think in over time, the philosophy for me that's changed is that your proof of work is everywhere, right? It's literally everywhere. It's if you're exercising, proof of work is your body. If you're eating well, proof of work is your health, right? There's proof of work all over. You can learn about a certain topic if you only learn the shallow stuff. If you only read the headlines, you're not really going to learn it. There's no proof of work there. You've tried to use somebody else's work to come to your own conclusion, right? You haven't done the work yourself. You haven't tried to understand what something is. So that proof of work is so important. And like I said, it applies to everything in life. For myself, social media, the last 3 years, I was basically making nothing, right? I had no income, but I was constantly just putting out content, right? That's the work. The proof there is you can see how many times I've tweeted, right? You can see that there, right? You can see the organic engagement. You can see the growth in following over time, and that proof of work leads to income over time. And right now, I'm starting to earn that money, and I think Bitcoin has really helped me solidify that proof of work is so important. Of course, there's also the fact that understanding Bitcoin is proof of work on its own, right? If you have all those excuses we talked about before, you haven't done the work, and that's proof. That's proof of no work, right? Becomes very obvious when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about, when you're arguing with them or like just having a debate, and if they're not willing to accept what you're saying, if they're cutting you off, if they're not letting you get your point across, you know for a fact that they probably haven't done the work, right? And they're not willing to learn. They don't have an open mind. They have a fixed mindset. They don't have an open a growth mindset. They have a fixed mindset, right? So and that proof of work is everything. So it applies to everything. Applies all over the world. I was actually looking at my wife does a little bit of gardening, and the proof of work there is the fact that she keeps doing it day after day, day after day. She keeps watering these plants. She keeps taking care of them. Now there's flowers coming up, and that wouldn't have happened if she hadn't put in that work. So it applies to everything. I think that proof of work principle, that concept is so important, and it's definitely evolved over time. I didn't completely understand it before, but now I see everything is proof of work, right? Everything around us, it's work. Everything requires work. Everything requires an input of energy. So I think that's the thing that really changed my mindset about a lot of things in life, really.
Yes, and I think the biggest misconception with finance, with economics, with Bitcoin is that things are going to come easy. And I really love that you said your principle, your philosophy is the proof of work, because that is essentially the Bitcoin ethos. And when you look at Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now it's X, you being so vocal on there, you being so passionate on there, like I mentioned before, I think that when you go into these Twitter spaces as a Bitcoiner, and initially when you start off, you want to learn as much as you can, but then you start jumping into these Twitter spaces where you have really intellectual, intelligent people, and then also on the flip side, not so intelligent people immersed in these rooms. And it's literally like a gym. It's like a training ground for Bitcoiners. Like, if you can survive some of these Twitter spaces and get your point across, have people respect you, have people believe in your ethos, I think that that's when you've arrived. And I think, of course, you've done that numerous amounts of times across the Twitter spaces, whether it's tweets, whether it's jumping in a Twitter space, and, advocating for Bitcoin on your own right. A lot of people in this space see the price of Bitcoin shooting up 70,000, 71,000. It has a retrace. It goes back down to 68. And they're so scared of vacillation. They're so scared of the ups and downs. And it's like, as a finance guy, you realize that when people say, oh, you can just get into stocks, it's a lot safer, or get into treasuries or bonds, but they don't realize that that's based on the credit system. It's based on the faith that the US dollar is going to continue to be strong. And those things can drop just as fast as Bitcoin can drop. But the difference is that Bitcoin has finite scarcity. There's only 21 million. There's no CEO. There's no founder. There's no one in control to manipulate the asset, the principal asset. And a lot of people have not come to that conclusion yet because they're so inundated with fiat money, inundated with the US always being number one and always being a winner in the market. And I think that Bitcoin is the checkmate for a lot of people that hopefully will come to a conclusion that this is the safe bet.
I think a lot of people say that Bitcoin is speculation, but I don't think they understand that every asset is speculation, right? It's not like when you buy stocks, you're speculating that the customers of that company will continue to buy, right, at whatever product they're selling. How do you know that app producers, app creators, whatever they're called, how do you know that they're going to continue to produce apps for Apple? There's a lot of money there, but what happens if Apple starts charging 50% of their what do you know how they have that 30% fee? What if they start charge 50, 60%? What if they keep going up because they can't keep up with their tax costs, right? What happens if the US government can't keep up with its debts, like its repayments? What happens in that case? You have no control, right? You can't really do anything to predict that. You don't know when that's going to happen. You have no idea when or if the US government will increase tax rates for all these companies. I mean, they're sending money all over the world. Why wouldn't they, right? Eventually, that's the only solution, right? Unless they keep printing, inflation will get out of hand. Inflation is already getting out of hand. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's gonna keep, the system is gonna keep getting worse. And you don't know when it's gonna collapse. It's a house of cards. It's one bad weather event away from the entire thing falling apart, right? One gust of wind where it'll just drop, and it shouldn't be that delicate, right? And I think Bitcoin is going to be that event, right? Bitcoin is going to be that situation that puts the legacy financial system to rest.
What is this archaic system?
Mother's maiden name? Leibowitz?
You're telling me this guy is how things get verified.
That's my job.
I'm just saying, you shouldn't have to buy $10 worth of gum if you just want 79 cents worth of gum. Why do you get charged your money to take your money from your account? And if you're out of money, they charge you for being out of money?
What?
An overseas transfer takes 5 days?
Business days.
Why?
What are they using? A Zeppelin?
I deposit the check Monday.
But Monday was a bank holiday.
Why is this the way it is?
A bank holiday?
This system
What's a bank holiday?
makes no sense.
This makes no sense.
Who designed this system?
Now,
Is this really the best we can do?
hello?
Don't we deserve better?
From your perspective, what are the most significant impacts Bitcoin has had on the global financial system? And what future impacts do you foresee?
So I think something that's really important is that before Bitcoin, we relied on the banking system. We if we wanted to get paid, there's no way for us to get paid from, let's say, across the world, or let's say from an employer. There's no way for us to get paid unless they give us cash before Bitcoin, right? So we had to go through banks. There was no way to go to get paid without a bank, right? You have to go through a bank. They can give you a gold bar, but who's going to do that? They can give you something that you can take, but who's going to do that, right? Now it's a little different. If I want to pay someone for their services, I can pay them in Bitcoin, and I don't need these banks anymore, right? So I mean, I think what's going to happen is the institutions that integrate Bitcoin into their business are going to do very well, right? The businesses that don't are going to eventually collapse, right? It's not possible. So let's think of it this way: if Vanguard never offers Bitcoin ETFs, never allows its customers to buy Bitcoin, it keeps its I guess its view for the next 10 years. What's going to happen? Everybody's going to see Bitcoin skyrocket, I think, over the next 10 years. a 10x is very conservative. It's going to happen over the next 10 years if Vanguard doesn't switch to saying, okay, we'll allow you to have Bitcoin ETFs. How many people will leave Vanguard? How many people will already have left Vanguard in that time, right? Because they're not changing their mind, and these people aren't going to come back, right? It's a hassle. It's a headache moving money from one brokerage to another, right? A lot of people are already leaving. A lot of people will leave after the halving. More people will leave if Vanguard doesn't change. But that's the thing, right? Bitcoin on a Bitcoin standard, nobody's too big to fail. Everybody can fail. Everybody can go to zero. There's no guardrails, right? So if, let's say, for example, we go on a Bitcoin standard and some random company starts taking debt and they start gambling on some random thing that they think is going to appreciate, there's no way for the US government to protect them unless they give away their treasury savings, right? Unless they give away, let's say, Bitcoin. If they give away their Bitcoin, right, they're gonna have to get permission from everybody in the country to actually do it, right? And that's probably not going to happen. There's no way to do. I guess there's no way to do transactions under the table on a Bitcoin standard. If politicians, if a country has a treasury, the entire world is going to know that it's there, and every transaction is going to be combed through. Everybody's going to look through every single detail, right? And at that point, there's no reckless spending anymore. I think most people don't even understand that their money is being used to fund these wars. Their savings are being used, and most people don't get it, right? That's not going to happen anymore. I feel like there's going to be a massive change unless, things go completely the opposite way. Let's say BlackRock accumulates all the Bitcoin, then they give it all to the US government, and the US government does the same thing that it does with gold, right? Who knows? I personally think it's going to go the other way. I think it's going to be where Bitcoin is dominant. It's the asset that everybody wants. Any company that doesn't support it, any company that doesn't integrate it into their business is going to do very badly, right? They're going to fail. They're going to collapse, and that's the only way to go.
Rajat, that was like speaking the gospel right there. That was what people need to hear, man. Like, they don't realize there's so many CEOs out there that are looking at their fiduciary responsibilities, their responsibilities to their shareholders, to their balance sheets, and they're looking at the percentage of inflation, right? It's increasing every day. We're probably going to get into this entangle with the Middle East, with Iran. We're already dealing with Ukraine, with Russia, with China, import, export stuff. And then, like, it seems like every week, every month, we have a new entanglement that we're dealing with the American economy. And of course, they can adjust the interest rate and tweak a few things, but you can't taper a Ponzi, as they say in the Bitcoin space. But where do we get to a point where Bitcoin becomes this technological innovation that everyone just understands, gets it, and if they don't, they are going to fail, like you said, Rajat? Could you discuss some of the most exciting technological innovations within the Bitcoin ecosystem that you've seen so far that you believe are going to be game changers?
I think over time we're going to notice that people don't need to know how Bitcoin works for it to benefit them, right? They don't need to understand it. They don't need to understand the whole thing. They don't need to understand the technical parts. I actually had a conversation with someone yesterday. He did a very shallow. He did some shallow research. He understands the main topics. Like, he understands, okay, there's a limited amount. There has to be mined into existence. All that kind of the basic stuff. But he didn't understand, let's say, the economics of mining, right? He didn't understand how the halving will impact miners, right? He didn't understand all that. And that's perfectly fine, right? Because what he was doing is he's trying to save in Bitcoin to protect his income, right? To protect his wealth, right? He doesn't really care about the details. It's a market asset. It will work out. At the end of the day, whatever happens. You can't really stop it from happening. And most people, think about it. Most people, even right now, don't understand the financial system, right? So I don't think that's a barrier to entry. Understanding the system has nothing to do with it. I think once we get to the Satoshi level of Bitcoin, so let's say when one Satoshi is valuable, I think, because right now it's basically worthless, right? It's a fraction of a penny. So once one Bitcoin is worth something, let's say one Bitcoin is worth $1, That's when people really, I think that's when it works in the background. That's when it works without people having to really think about it. So you can send, I think a lot of people will be using Lightning, for example. I think a lot of people will be using custodial wallets. I don't think they'll be using I don't think they'll be transacting on the blockchain. But I think over time, we're going to find better and better ways to use it, to distribute it, to give more people access, right? Right now, I think more people have access to Bitcoin than they have access to banks. So just that alone is huge, right? But over time, we're going to improve that. There's no way that won't improve, right? There's money to be made. Why wouldn't, if somebody could make money, that's what capitalism is, right? Capitalism isn't about hoarding real estate. It's not about making food shittier and shittier quality over time. It's not about paying you less in wages. It's about using your resources and making the most of them, right? That's what capitalism is. Capitalism isn't about exploiting people. We've turned it into that, right? There's something called late stage capitalism. There's cronyism. All of these are just, they're not actual capitalism, right? It's different from capitalism. So I think what Bitcoin is going to do, the technologies that are going to come up in the next few years, the next decade or so, they're going to change everything, right? I haven't had any problems with Lightning, but I'm not an expert, not by any means. I don't completely understand what the problems there could be, but there are people working on that, right? There is enough eyes on there that I can get away with not focusing my attention on that, right? I think over time, the technology will improve as long as you're holding Bitcoin in your own cold storage, as long as you have your UTXO management and all that stuff done, you're good, right? Over time, there will also be the threat of quantum computing, right? And I was speaking to a friend, he explained what he thinks could happen. It's possible that they could break the encryption, the SHA-256 encryption within the next 5, 10, 15 years. And the only thing that will have to be done is a fork, right? A hard fork where anybody who has access to Bitcoin can move over, or they get the new coins, however it works. But essentially, you're going to have to sign one transaction. And I think that's, if you're paying attention to the economy, if you're paying attention to how Bitcoin works, this is something that you'll have to do, something that you have to figure out. I think that'll be a little bit painful for people because a lot of people won't figure it out in time. They'll lose their coins. They'll forget their private keys, but all that stuff is, I think that all that stuff is going to be worked out over time. It'll just take some time. Like we said, technology, it's always improving. It's not like things are going to get worse, right? We have these cold wallets, so we're never going to get rid of them. We don't even know what technology is going to come up. Over time, people think of different things, but that's the thing, right? One of the best things about Bitcoin is that you don't have to be a massive company to build a technology, right? If you can save for 5 years, 7 years, and you're doing the work in the background, let's say you're working a job, you're trying to work on Bitcoin, and you're saving in Bitcoin. Over time, 5, 10, 15 years later, you'll have enough savings to fund your own company, to build your own technology, to build whatever you need to hire engineers and all that stuff. So over time, I think that the innovation is endless, right? There's no way to predict where things are going. 20, 30 years from now, there's going to be so many things that we haven't even thought of, right? And who knows, maybe those things will make it so that everybody can have self-sovereign Bitcoin. Everybody can control a UTXO. Everybody can control their own coins. They don't have to rely on a custodial service to hold their coins for them.
Well said, well said. And just to peel back the layers a little bit on quantum computing, I think in the next decade to 20 years, we're going to see AI, energy, and quantum computing be the three big players that will intermesh itself with Bitcoin. I truly think, and this is just my opinion, that they definitely could get a quantum computer to probably crack the Bitcoin protocol, but the amount of resources, energy, funding that it would take, the same way that they're going to be working on this, expeditiously for the next decade to try to quote unquote crack it, there's going to be Bitcoin creators, developers that are going to be working to mitigating that at the same front. So I'm kind of like in a weird space where like it's possible, but I just don't see, like, the US government right now, they're not allocating their resources in the right things at the moment. So I couldn't imagine them taking $1 billion or $5 billion to create a quantum computer to crack Bitcoin when they're just spending money frivolously all these other different places. It just doesn't make sense to me right now as a Bitcoiner. It probably could change if they find a cheap energy source or they find a way to just massively upgrade the technological advancements of society within the next decade with chip modification or something. That could be possible. But on that front, I do agree with you about 98% of everything you said there, Rajat. And I think that a lot of people are not even on that level yet. Like they're still trying to figure out what is sound money. You know what I mean? They're not even thinking about quantum computing yet. But I love that you brought that up because some people that watch this show are thinking about quantum computing. And I think that those are the things that will get the wheels turning to say, okay, if we're a decade ahead of this thought process, how do we figure out now to figure out ways to mitigate having those issues in the future?
I completely agree. I think we're just going to have to keep doing the work. I mean, the U.S., it's like you said, the money that the U.S. government is spending isn't being spent efficiently, right? We're not, this isn't a capitalist society. We're in, I would say we're closer to socialism, if anything, right? The U.S. government, the money that the U.S. government is borrowing should be used as an investment, right? They may think of it as an investment when they're sending it to Ukraine, they're sending it to any other country, whoever they're sending it to. Not to be political, I don't care about that. That's not relevant to me. I don't even live in the U.S., right? I'm in Canada, so it doesn't. I mean, it impacts me over the long term, but it doesn't impact me directly, right? But I think at the end of the day, the money that the U.S. government is borrowing should be used as an investment, right? It should be used as a way to figure out what's going to happen in the future, to invest in the futures of American citizens, to invest in the futures of anybody who holds U.S. dollars, right? They're supporting your country, they're holding your currency, and they're giving you something that you can actually continue to use to spend money, right? But what they're doing is they're giving that money away. They're not using it to their advantage. They're not using it to build the future of their country. They're using it to destroy the futures of others, right? And I don't feel like that's right. Regardless of political sides, regardless of where you think things should go, I think it's kind of scary to think that these governments can print money at will. They can, not print, but borrow money at will. The central banks can print money at will. And we have to work for pieces of paper that can literally be created out of thin air, right? We're giving away our life, we're giving away our time, and the US government is just giving it away, right? I mean, the quantum computing, for example, that's something that we're going to have to think about over the long term. It's just the research, right? It takes time to get to that point, to get to the level of depth where you actually understand where quantum computing can take us. You have to understand private keys. You have to understand encryption. There's a lot of, I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert at any of that. I understand the basics, right? I mean, even quantum computing, for example, so maybe something that I don't completely understand, perfectly fine. But I understand that there's a threat, and I understand that eventually we will have to work on it. So when there is a solution, I won't be surprised. I'll be ready to take advantage.
Agreed. How do you view Bitcoin's role in promoting financial inclusion, especially in underbanked and unbanked regions of the world?
Well, I mean, it gives everybody access to money, right? It gives everybody access to a financial system. Previously, those countries did not have access. Like there's a list of like a bunch of countries that don't have access to SWIFT, right? So they're basically cut off from the global financial system, right? All these countries can now start transacting, right? All the people within these countries can now start being productive, right? Think about how many people. There's a guy who I regularly speak to. He asked me about Bitcoin, how it works, and all that stuff. I asked him. He has some knowledge too, right? Which is great. But he lives in Nigeria, right? And he's telling me how, to him, these fees don't matter. The fees are irrelevant, right? Because to him, when the fees are a certain amount, he's just locking his Bitcoin away. He's not even touching it. He's just leaving it there, right? So all the people who are complaining, oh, Bitcoin's not going to work because the fees are so high, all these just random complaints that people have, I mean, they're irrelevant, right? Over time, we're going to see that the people who don't have access to banking will now be able to transact with one another instead of having to use the currency that their corrupt leaders may have given them. They can now transact properly, right? They can now be productive. They can now share resources. They don't rely on their government that may be out to get them, right? And that changes everything, right? Because it gives everybody around the world the ability to produce something and to pay for their expenses. That's huge, right? It changes so much of how we think, how we the Michael Saylor talks a lot about property rights, and that's massive, right? Most people don't have property rights. With Bitcoin, they do. That's where the I guess the banks, they don't really. I mean, they try to give you property rights, but they're not real. They're not really giving you that wealth, right? If your money could be taken away from you immediately, overnight, right? But with Bitcoin, that's not possible. So just that alone, it completely reshuffles the wealth around the world, right? People who own Bitcoin today, and they're mostly the people who are unbanked, they're going to be the ones extracting wealth from the US real estate market. Everybody has US real estate. Everybody wants US stocks. The people who own Bitcoin today are going to be extracting wealth from those legacy assets. So it's going to change everything. I think it's going to, the wealth redistribution is going to be massive.
Yes, and on that front, when people talk about property rights, I always tell people that are new to the space that have never been involved in Bitcoin that, let's say you have 100 grand in cash and you want to deposit it into the bank. You deposit it into the bank, they're going to wholeheartedly take that money, be super happy with you, give you a membership card. You might get a coffee or a drink with the manager, the banking manager, but you wait a week and you go back and you say, I want to pull all my money out. Now there's going to be a problem. Everyone's going to jump up. Hey, why? They're going to ask you all these questions, fill out this form. It's going to take 5 to 7 days, maybe 30 days to get your money. And then that's when you realize, like, you don't really own the money that you've given them, right? Like, now it's theirs and it's a fight to get back what you put in. Bitcoiners don't have that issue. If I have $1 million in Bitcoin, granted, if the fees are high, I might take a hit on fees a bit. But as far as the time frame, if the on-chain transactions are moving as they should, I should get that money within 10, 15, 30 minutes. That's unheard of in the traditional banking system. When you're talking about 6 figures of money, you're dealing with the IRS, you're dealing with the rails, the financial rails, the SWIFT system, all these different things that just make the issues of getting your money back or having your money flow peer to peer way more complex. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners have figured out that that is not the case with this protocol, where if you have money, if you live in another country, if you live in India or any of these places, like I always use India as an example because I used to be a gold bug in the finance space. India is huge about gold, not only for sovereign wealth and as an investment, but there's also some metaphysical properties there that they believe in, that gold is a healing property, which we understand. But the basis of it is that a lot of Indians have realized that, their currency over time has been debased, and they realize that gold can be passed down through the family structure to keep their sovereign wealth high. Now Bitcoin comes into the world where, God forbid, you have to flee the country. You can't jump on an airplane with, 2 gold bars in your pocket because they're going to get seized. But you can walk on the plane with that treasure or that ledger wallet and have all your money in tow, and no one will bat an eye because it's technology, right? Like, you put it through the scanner, they make sure there's nothing nefarious in it, and then you just keep going. And I think that that's where the Bitcoiner and the traditional gold investor or someone that lives in another country will have that aha moment of saying, oh my goodness, this is what Rajat was talking about on these Twitter spaces. I get it now.
Yeah, I mean, eventually everybody's going to have that. They're going to have that realization that Bitcoin is the only way to go. It doesn't matter if they don't really understand it. It doesn't matter if they don't know the technical stuff. If they don't understand what mining is, perfectly fine. They don't need to, right? All they need to know is that this is sound money. It's money that can't be stolen from you. It's money that can't be it's money that can't be printed out of thin air, right? You're giving away your finite resource, which is your time, in order to get this money. You shouldn't be getting paid in something that can be created out of nothing.
Rajat, I have one more question for you, which is the future of Bitcoin. Where do you see Bitcoin in the next 5 to 10 years, both in terms of technological development and its integration into everyday financial practices?
Well, I think it could. It could happen. I think the adoption is going to either happen really, really quickly, like overnight. We're going to see it one day. It's going to happen really, really quickly, but I feel like I think a lot of people are going to they're going to be forced into it, right? Let's say, for example, some country comes out and says, "Hey, we're going to buy every single Bitcoin under $100,000 on every single exchange all at once," right? Who's to stop them from doing that? The U.S. government can literally print as much money as it wants to, and it can create a bid for the bot for to buy Bitcoin no matter what. If it goes below 100,000, we're going to buy every single coin, right? They could easily do that. I'm not sure why they haven't already. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense to me because they can print this money, right? If anything, they're actually selling the Bitcoin that they own, which is kind of stupid. But what can you do, right? Over time, we're going to see it as part of every financial institution, right? Every financial institution is going to offer some kind of service where they help you hold your Bitcoin, where they help you store your Bitcoin, where they can be that trusted third party to hold a key if you need if you have a multi-sig wallet with multiple people holding Bitcoin for you. I mean, that's just how it's going to be over time. The financial industry will have to integrate Bitcoin into their services, or they're not going to survive. Every institution is going to have to fight that. They're going to have to get rid of the CEOs that don't have an open mind, the ones that don't really want to understand what this is. They're going to have to get rid of them, right? And I mean, MicroStrategy is putting up. They're showing everybody that you can go from being a company that's constantly losing money to being a company that's always making money, or over time making money, right? I mean, how much did they make on their Bitcoin? They made they doubled their investment or something like that. They doubled their earning, their initial purchase price, and over time, more companies are going to try to do that. More companies are going to have to do that, and they're going to rely on banks to hold their Bitcoin for them, right? Think about how much Bitcoin's held with Coinbase. You really think that more and more companies are going to keep holding their Bitcoin with Coinbase? I don't think so, right? Over time, I think it'll be distributed. I think companies will come out around the world that are doing something like this. I think this will be a global competition, right? And whoever gets to it first will be the one that benefits the most.
Agreed, man. That was such an awesome way to look at this entire conversation. This Bitcoin conversation has been awesome. And I want to thank you, Rajat, for sharing your invaluable insights and experiences with us today. To our audience, if you found this conversation as fascinating as we did, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation. Hitting the notification bell ensures you won't miss out on any future talks with leading minds in the space, such as Rajat. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you back for our next conversation. Rajat, before we go, can you give people your social media and any other projects that you want to push out?
Yeah, of course. My accounts are on Twitter. I have a Twitter account, Rajat Soni Finance. The finance doesn't have an I. I'm on Instagram as well. It's the same thing, Rajat Soni Finance, but the finance does have an I, so that's the difference. I have a newsletter, free newsletter that you can join. Constantly putting out different information. There's a paid version of it as well, which will give you even more information, but you don't have to sign up for that. You can get the weekly newsletters. Other than that, I'm starting a paid community where I'm constantly putting out more and more information. All the tweets that I'm putting out on Twitter, even more in-depth information, right? So this community is something that I've been working on for a while. All that stuff, most of it is free. You want to go for a paid community, you can if you want. But my goal here is just to get out as much Bitcoin information as possible while making money doing so.
Until then, keep exploring the vast potential of Bitcoin and stay informed with the Bitcoin Source. Thank you, Rajat.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.